Hey everyone, welcome. We are so happy to have you here. My name is Riggs K, and today we've got a cool new toolkit just for meshers. This new tool set is designed to streamline your workflow by providing tools to increase your efficiency. And if you're new to meshing, this tool is going to make it much easier for you to get started. After our demo, we will hold a Q&A session, and please use the Q&A feature to ask questions, and remember to keep your questions on topic and GA friendly. If you have not downloaded the latest IMVU Studio product, you can find it at a link that I will stick in our chat. And you can also find recordings of our past IMVU Studio learning sessions on another link, and I'll also put that into chat. And also, just a reminder, and also we'll put a link into where you can download the toolkit. And we will be recording this webinar so that creators who are unable to attend this live session can view it later. And now let's introduce the team. So we have got, for the very first time, Mighty 7, our technical artist who built this new toolkit we're going to show you. We also have Drosselmeyer, who is our senior technical artist focused on IMVU Studio. So glad to have you both here, Mighty 7 and Drosselmeyer.
Thank you.
Great to be here.
And also Tonic is just going to be hanging out, maybe answering some questions later. Tonic is our studio product director. Great to have you here, Ton.
Hey folks, great to be here.
All right, so now we are going to take it away and have Mighty 7 take you through the IMVU Studio Toolkit.
Actually, I'm going to lead off and give a little brief.
Oh, right, I am so sorry. I meant Drosselmeyer is going to give a brief introduction.
No,
and then
no worries.
Okay.
Yeah, so I was just going to give a brief overview of what the Studio Toolkit is and what we're going to cover in this learning session. So we're going to be presenting a lot of information in a very short period of time. There's a lot to cover in the tool itself. And because of that, we're not going to cover some other things like how to do modeling and how to do animating in Blender. And we're not going to cover all the aspects of creating for IMVU Studio. This tool allows you to streamline some processes, but we will just try and cover how to use the tool, like what the features of the tool are, how to use the features of the tool, and how to get the output of those features into Studio. And so we can take up questions at the end if there's questions about specifically, what you need to do in Studio. We'll cover a little bit of that, but we're not going to cover it to depth. The toolkit itself, Studio Toolkit is a toolkit that gets installed in Blender and provides some features to streamline production of certain assets that you'd be making for IMVU Studio, like rooms, furniture, clothing, animation, poses, attachments. We're trying to cover as many of the basic features or products types that you would be making making for IMVU Studio. As Riggs mentioned, she will be putting a link to where you can download that toolkit. It's also the help page where there's a lot of great information. A lot of what we're going to be covering in this learning session is documented on the webpage. We are, it's currently, as I mentioned, it's currently available for Blender. We are actively developing a version for 3D Studio Max as well. Just to cover one aspect of the tool, there's an export part of the tool, and that will also have a link to the same CEC Creator Education Center help page where you can find more information about that. The tool also will notify you if you need to update, and Cameron's going to go over that. And it's got some other neat little features. But without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Cameron so you can get to the meat of this session and start showing you how it works.
All right, let's get into it. Can you, is it looking at the right screen?
Yeah, I see Blender.
Perfect. So as Drosselmeyer was saying, here's the export portion of it that has the help button. So that's where that is. So we'll start out with updating it if you already have it, or installing it for the first time. They're both pretty much the same process, but you can see right now I have an update available button, which is just letting me know that the version that I have currently is outdated. So we can start by going into edit preferences. And once in,
Oh, I just mentioned that help button is the link to the CEC page.
yeah, so if I were to click that, it pops open this. If it wants to detach, no? Okay, well, it opens up the help page.
Take our word for it, it really does.
Yeah. So if you're in the add-ons tab, if you already have it installed, you can click enabled add-ons or search for IMVU, and this will pop up. I'm gonna remove this one so that I can install. I have it on my desktop, and you should have downloaded a zip file, so that's what you'll want to bring into Blender. So I'll install that, and now I'll click the checkbox, and the update available is now not here anymore. And to open up this side panel, you can either press the N button, or there's a little arrow up here that you can click, and it'll be right here. So now that we're into it, we can start with the room tool. The room tool, there's first off these three sliders, which if you adjust them, changes the scale of the room, so you can get sort of a reference size that you want to make your room. And then when you click create room, it'll have everything you need, all the camera targets and seat nodes, and this reference cube here, which is the height that a seat should be. And all of these values you can adjust even after it's been made. That's not how that's supposed to work.
Okay.
Okay,
Live television.
there we go. Now it's doing it. So we'll start out here. There's a floor, wall, and ceiling buttons here. And if you have floor selected and click on plus furniture, you'll see you get a furniture.floor.01 node. And that's for placing, say, a couch or any sort of furniture that would be on the floor inside of Studio. Or if somebody is inside of your room, or if you're decorating the room, you can put everything there. So there's also the wall with directions on those. So if you make a north wall node, it'll put it on this back wall here. And I can go into the local view space, and you can see that the blue arrow is always pointing in. So if I create a south node, blue arrow is pointing in, east and west, same thing. So you can use those to get the direction that you want out of your wall nodes. And as same thing with the ceiling. Now beneath that is sort of a duplication that you can do. So if I want this wall to be covered in wall nodes, then I can bring this node up here, and I can click down, and it'll duplicate them down. And this value is how far it goes. So if I do 10 there, I have that node selected and click right, it moves all the way over here. And this also works with selecting multiple nodes. So I can grab all of these ones and then bring them to the right. And now we have a grid of furniture nodes on a wall that works on the ceiling and the floor as well. So I will clear those out for now so that it's not messy. And we have the seat nodes. There's the three basic seat nodes. There's idle, standing, and sitting. And they all get created with a catcher, a pitcher, and a handle. So a handle is useful for a seat node, or a sitting node. If I were to make that and make this cube a seat, I would want a handle up here so that the thing that you click to go into the seat is above the seat instead of inside of it. And then the catcher and pitcher are helpful for two-person animations that occur. If you don't want either of those, then you can click on the node, and beneath it, there are these link buttons. So I can see this is the clear catcher button, and that'll get rid of the catcher and pitcher nodes, or I can bring them back. And same with the handle. And that also works if I were to select multiple seats. I can add a catcher and pitcher to all of them and add handles to all of them. If you have a custom action that you want to play when you're on a seat, you can also name them. So if I had a dance action, I can create a seat.dance node, and it names everything correctly, so you don't need to worry about that. You just create it and it will work inside of Studio. The next bit is the see-through node. Those get a little bit more complicated, so I'm going to bring in a room mesh that I already have and show those off. So I'll create a new scene first, and I'll create the room first. So I want to go through the process of clicking create room or furniture or anything for any of these that you want to import a mesh. You want to tell the tool what you're doing first. And
Yeah,
now
you basically just want to set the scene up for the product type.
Yeah. So I can go into import FBX, and I have this room, and I'm going to go into the materials and make these so that we can see through them. Just real quick, this would happen automatically in Studio. There is a setting inside of Studio to see through the back faces, but it is not set by default in Blender. So I'll do that. And now that we have our own room, we don't need this room.mesh. So I can select that in the scale cube and delete them. And we're left with this nice room. So to go back on the furniture real quick, it's all in reference to that reference room. So if I were to create a north wall furniture, it'll create it here, which is where the old wall used to be. So you can just bring that back and position it where you want it. And once you have that one, when you duplicate them, they'll all be in the same general area. So now for the see-through nodes, if I'd want this mesh to go invisible so that I can see if the camera's back here, and that doesn't happen automatically. So if I create a see-through node, you'll get this cone looking object, which the actual mesh of this cone won't be exported. So you don't need to worry about hiding it or anything. It's just in Blender so you can see what's going on. So as long as you can see the point, or as long as you can't see the back of it, rather, the mesh will be showing. So it kind of points into the room. So I can start by rotating this cone 90 degrees. I believe that's 90. And I'll place it against this wall here. So I'm setting it up so that if I go past this point, the wall will disappear. So now I can click that node, shift click on the wall, and link to see-through. And now you'll be able to see if you were to go here, window2.stmesh01, that lets you know that it's set up and linked to this cone, which is under the skeleton.room. You can see it's see-through armature 01. So that number will stay consistent with however many see-through nodes you have. Now it's also important to note that any mesh that's getting exported needs to be underneath this room.export collection. So right now, these meshes aren't going to be exported because they're just in the scene collection. So I'm going to bring them into the room collection I have here. And that's just where I put all of my meshes, and it's a good place to put them. And the tool will handle putting all the seats in the right place and everything like that. So now that we have this all set up, we can save our file. I will save it here as.
And you'll note that the tool will warn you that the file is not saved.
Yeah.
And you need to have it saved before the export will work.
So I'll name it learning session room, save the Blender file, and now that warning goes away. And there's also a helpful button here called Open Export Directory, which if I click this, it pops open your Windows Explorer, or it works on Macs as well. And you can see there's the learning session room.blend. So now that I've saved the scene, I can click export, and you'll get a little note down here saying that it was exported, and we can go into Studio. So let's create a new room. Start from example 3D scene. and derive. And we'll go into the top left and import an FBX. Go to learning session room and open. Now these should be set up so if you wanted to, you could skip and you can sort of get these meshes in quickly, but I'll check to see that the meshes are all in. It's going to skeleton.room. All my materials are here and I can import it. Rooms may take a while with how many meshes they have, but shouldn't take too long. And there we go. So now we have our room set up the way that we want it to. And if I go to the back side of this wall, it goes invisible just like we set up.
That's pretty cool.
And I believe, did I leave the, yeah. So if I go into decoration mode, you can see that these nodes are all set up the way that they should be.
Nice.
Perfect. So now we can head into furniture. And furniture is very similar, so I'll try and make it quick. So we'll do a new file again, go into the sidebar and create a furniture. This gives you just a basic cube that is the correct height for a seat and then what side each of them are as reference. So you can see the same buttons here for idle, standing, sitting, or custom node, the catcher, pitcher, handle, link and unlink buttons, and see-through nodes. So those all work the same way as the room tool. So I can import my mesh for this one. Furniture. I want to make sure that this is underneath the mesh collection again, or just inside of furniture.export. I just prefer to have them in mesh. And I'll get rid of the scale cube. I'll create 2 sitting nodes, one for each seat. And I'll quickly make a see-through node for the back of it just because it's already aimed the right way. And link. Oh, and if you don't want it linked anymore, you can always click the mesh and click unlink, and that'll work as you'd expect. So
And you can link multiple objects too, right?
yeah, so if I had a bunch of meshes, I could either click on the cone and then click all the different meshes. It doesn't matter what order as long as they're all selected, and you can link it that way. Unlinking, you just grab whichever meshes you want to and unlink them. It all works pretty much however you want to select anything. So now I can save this scene. I'll do learning session furniture and export. And we can go back into Studio, create a new tab, and we'll make a furniture with empty furniture. Import the FBX again. See that it has everything and import. So now you see we have our couch. We can sit in either of these 2 places. And if I go around the back of it, it'll turn invisible. And it's pretty easy to go back and make changes. So I see that these seats are too far back. So I can just come back into Blender, bump these forward, click export again. And if I go back in, I can re-import the same couch. And just like that, it should move the seats forward a little bit. And it looks a lot better now.
Nice.
Okay. Now we can move on to the attachment tool. So I'll create a new scene again. Head over to the sidebar and do append attachment file. And these work by importing there's a scene that has all of these, the attachment file, clothing, and animation hidden, and it pulls in what files you need. So from here, we can
Yeah,
import.
no need to manually import all that.
Yeah. Just importing any meshes that you've made on the side, which I wouldn't say preferred method, but the way that I've been using the tool has been going into a Blender scene, creating objects, and then I can bring them in afterwards. So I can grab this attachment bracelet, bring that in. And I've already positioned it so that it's in the right place, but if you were making the bracelet here, you could make it, then move it over there.
And that's just the mesh. That's just the mesh, right?
Yeah, this is just a mesh. This is nothing more than a mesh. So now there's a bone eyedropper tool here, and you can click that eyedropper and hover over whichever bone you want, so you can see the name changing. And I'll click on right wrist, and you can see now the mesh comes in, so you can switch between male, female, or hide if you want to just see your mesh. And this doesn't change what's exported. This is just for your reference to scale any attachment that you're making correctly. So now that we have this here, we can click on the mesh and click Setup Mesh. And this tool will automatically bring the mesh into the export collection, so you don't need to worry about that. So now that that's in, we can save it. This one's real quick if you have everything set up. Session attachment. And you'll also note that inside of the attachment.rig file where it has the root and node, the attachment node now has these square brackets at the end with the name of a bone. Now, whether you're using this tool or not, if you set up an attachment the way that the Creator Education Center tells you to, if you just add this code to the end of attachment node, then you'll see what it does inside of Studio, and you'll save a step. So now I can export, head back into Studio again, and we'll head to accessories. And we can create the empty male accessory. And I'll import my learning session attachment. Mesh is brought in. Do need to give it an ID. And just like that, it's on the wrist. If you were doing this without the Studio Toolkit, or if you didn't add the bracket right wrist to the end of the attachment node, you would have to come into the skeleton here and set it up yourself. So just a little bit of a time-saving step inside of Studio. Okay. So now the attachment's done. That also works if you have a pet or a hat that animates or anything like that. I believe it's bugged currently. I was messing with that, but it should be available soon. That if you have a rigged armature with a mesh onto it, you would just click on the root of the skeleton and then set up that as the mesh, and that'll connect the same way. And any of your animations that are linked to that will come into Studio under the Action tab when you do that. So that all works. Now we can go on to the clothing tool. So let's create a new scene again. And we'll append the clothing file. So this looks, that's not right.
What happened?
I don't know.
Oh, your clothing. Uh-oh.
I don't have a clothing tool.
Oh, that's too bad. That's too bad.
It's
there it
here,
is.
And then it's not.
Oh, weird.
Okay.
We'll have to write that one down.
Yeah, it was working yesterday.
Try restarting Blender, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe Blender got a bad state.
It's possible. This is 3. Let me do
time, audience, to think of questions you want to ask about.
I'm already answering some.
Okay, yeah. Feel free to ask questions anytime using the Q&A feature.
Yeah, that's okay. Well, let's the clothing tool is important. I'm gonna try and quickly re-download the version that's on web and see if that gives me any better results. So bear with me for a moment.
At least we discovered something.
Not the discovery that I wanted to discover.
At least we
Live,
can fix it.
live TV.
Exactly.
Okay, it looks like that is working now. Yeah. Okay, that'll be fun to look into. So the version that's available for all of you guys is
It's
working.
broken. Oh, it is.
It's
Okay.
working. Yeah, this
This
is the
this
one
has,
from the yeah.
okay, so this one hasn't been released. The latest and greatest hasn't been released yet.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Okay. So clothing tool, we have the male and female mesh and hide once again. These are also just for your reference and aren't exported. So I will import a t-shirt real quick. And once we have that, you can click this bind to armature button and you'll see it move under the collection on its own. And it wasn't supposed to stay there. There we go. It moves under the collection on its own. And if I go to this pose button here, I can move the skeleton around and sort of test how it's weighted and see all of that. As we can see here, you wouldn't want the t-shirt clipping through the body. So you could click on the paint weights button. It'll open up a tab over here, which has all of the different bones. So if I go to the left shoulder, I won't fully re-weight this, but I'll show just a little bit. You can see dark blue is where it has no weights, and as it gets closer to red, that's where it has 100% weighting. And the shoulder's moving the mesh over here. So I'll just move my weight down to 0 and paint that out a little bit. Because I don't want the shoulder affecting the shirt over here. So that'll help a little bit. Obviously, there's more to do, but that is the paint weights tab. And then the last button here is limit bones. And that's a little bit of a weird concept to grasp, but if you think about each one of these vertices, they each have an amount that these bones will affect them. So if I go back into paint weights and go to the spine, you can see that the vertice that's around here is affected by spine 1, a little bit by spine 2, a tiny bit by spine 3, and not at all by spine 4. Each vertex is only allowed to be bound to 4 bones at a time. It can't go higher than that. So if I were to have spine 4 and have some weights over there, the neck, have some weights. Now the vertex over here has too many bones weighted to it. So if I were to save this as, let's do learning session clothing, and if I go to export, it'll give me a warning that 1 or more bones have too many weights, and to use the limit bones button. And all this does is gets the 4. It gets 4 bones and sets it to 4 as opposed to having anything anymore. So if you click that, it'll go through everything and fix it so that when I go to export, it'll export correctly.
Yeah,
but you'll want to pose after limiting bones. You'll still want to pose to make sure that everything is set up the way that you want it to.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it doesn't. We couldn't figure out how to do that automatically, so it's a manual process. And just to note, we are looking at expanding that limit of 4 bones, but we're waiting on a technological improvement in the engine to accommodate more than 4 bones per vertex. And I have a link to information about the weighting limit. I will put in the chat right now. Okay.
I'll start bringing up the empty file while you're talking about that. So same process as before. Going into the empty, this is the empty t-shirt. I can import that learning session clothing. Give it a mesh ID and import. You can see the t-shirt is in. It does have this weird lump because that was when I was adding weights from different places, but it is on correctly. And as you can see right here, like behind the neck where there's the back side of the t-shirt, right now you can't see it. And normally you would go over here to this section and enable double-sided, for instance, and now there's a back face to it. But we've added a new feature that inside of Blender, if I go to this t-shirt, there's a material tab over here, and this is the material. So if I add a square bracket and then DS and another square bracket, that's a tag, and it reads DS for double-sided. This will also work if I did SI is self-illuminate. So if I add another square bracket and do SI, you can kind of layer on different tags. And now that I have that, I can export, go back into Studio, and I'll start fresh so that we can see it. Do mail top. And I can import that same t-shirt. And now you can see there is a back face to it, and self-illuminate is on by default. So you can do those with pretty much any of these. I believe there's nothing for iridescence or emission yet, since those are new. But double-sided cast shadows, receive shadows, all of these have a tag. So you can mess with those.
We'll put together a page,
Yeah.
either probably a fact page for what the equivalents are for all these. I just haven't done it yet.
Yep.
This is relatively new. It was sort of a little pet project between Cameron and one of the engineers here. And it kind of snuck into one of our releases, and so we haven't really promoted it or anything yet. So I will put something out there so we have a reference.
Yeah. So now we can head on to the last tool, the animation tool, and this can actually do animations or poses. So as you can see, once I clicked the append animation file, not only did it bring in the rig, it changed down here to the action editor, which we'll use to set up keyframes. So once we have this, you can see that you have all these different controls around. This one by the hand is the IK hand control. And the way the IK controls work is that you just grab the node associated with the hand or the foot. And as you move them around, it'll bend the knee. And you have this cone here that can change where the knee or elbow is pointing. So that there's two different modes, this IK and FK, and you can sort of switch out on a per hand or foot basis which one you want. And you should stick with whichever selection you have. So if you want like this arm specifically to be FK, stick with that throughout the whole animation. And if you do set it to FK, as you can see, if you uncheck the box, it'll go into FK mode, and this control will be hidden on this side, and you'll get these controls instead. So you can use these to rotate down the chain. We go into local, it's easier for this. You can rotate each bone and control the pose that way. Or you can go into IK and use the position transform to move the hand around. Underneath that, there's this rotation isolation, and that I'll show one on the left arm, one on the right arm to try and explain it, because it's a bit hard to explain with words. But first, I'll use this 0 pose button and go back to the start. So if I set both my arms to FK, and then I'll turn off rotation isolation on the right arm, which is this one. If I move the torso, you can see that this arm is moving in accordance to the hierarchy and the chain above it. So that's why it's going out and in. And then this avatar's left arm keeps its rotation. Its rotation is isolated from me moving the torso. So that can get different effects that you may want throughout your animation. So that is IKFK and rotation isolation. Now for everything else in the tool, zero the pose again, go back there. There's an animation length slider, which as you can see in the action editor, just changes how long the animation is. There's an add key button. So if I grab this hand, I can click add key, move the hand up here, click add key, or not click add key again. Move the slider forward. Then I can move this and click add key. And you can see there's now animation between those two frames. And there's this auto key button, which if you turn that on, if I move the slider up to 20 and then move the hand, it'll see that I moved the hand and add a key on its own. So that's a really useful and quick way to animate is with the auto key function. If you use the zero bone or zero pose with auto key on, that'll also work as putting a keyframe in. And the difference between zero pose and zero bone is just what bones it affects. Zero pose will grab every bone and zero those out. Zero bone is just the ones that you are selected on. So if I make a couple movements here, if I grab this hand and do zero bone, just those two will go down. And if I do zero pose, the rest of the body will zero. There's also these two checkboxes up here. There's a make pose and a export all bones. If you're exporting, say, a wave animation, you'll still want the most of the body doing the idle that it was doing, and you just want that arm to lift up and wave. So if you leave both of these unchecked, then just that arm will go up and wave. But if you do export all bones, then it'll break out of the idle animation, set every single bone that you set here up inside of Studio, and do the wave with that. And make pose will take whichever pose you have set up on frame 1. And when you go into Studio, I can show you how to set up a freeze frame. And so it's instead of an animation, it's just one position that the avatar goes in. And then lastly, the name of the animation goes here, which if you select the controls, this will pop up and you can name it whatever you'd like there. So since I've done a bunch of stuff here, I'm going to create a new file real quick and bring in the animation file. And I'll quickly do a little hand wave or motion here. So I'll turn on auto key and I'll add a key as my first frame. I'll go up to 10, move the hand up here, go up a little bit, move the hand here, and that'll be our wave. I can set this to 30 since that's all that was really done. Maybe I'll do 40 and I'll set an extra frame here that I zero the bone out. So it has a going back down too. We have that little wave and I can name it hand wave. So now that that's in like that, I can save the file, learning session animation, and I can export it. So you can see that it does go into this other state here with a name with a dash. You'll want to not touch this name or touch any of these keyframes. If you want to come back here and edit it again, you want to grab any of these nodes around the avatar, and that'll bring you back here where you can put your name in and change the keyframes as you'd like. So now that we have that exported, we can create, I'm going to go with the empty, I'll do empty female this time. With that, just because I've noticed it works better, but there's a bunch of different ways that you can bring in animations. So I can import the FBX, bring in animation. And you can see we have anim-handwave here. Import. And if we go to action, we can create a new action. I'll do hand wave, create an ensemble, and add your animation. So if I apply that and hit preview, then I can click play, and you'll see that my hand waving animation plays as you'd expect it to. So if I go back into Blender, I will go and do export all bones here and show you what that looks like. So now I can come back in here, create another empty female clothing, and import that same FBX. And now if I go to action and create an ensemble, you'll see I'll also disable gaze. If I play this one, the bones snap to the position that they are in Blender, and every single bone that has any bit of animation, or every single bone gets whatever animation or lack thereof inside of Blender and animates to that.
Yeah, every bone gets keyed.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Okay, and then I'll quickly show the pose as well. So if I start new again, animation tool, I'll click make pose. And now I'll just do a funky pose here. So now this will be my pose. And I got to add keys. Actually, not sure if I need to add keys since it's a pose. I may need to. But yeah. Okay, so I'll go back to 1. I'll turn on auto key, and I'll quickly set that up again. Oh, there we go. Like the foot control wasn't where I wanted it to be. So now as I do this, it'll add keyframes as I go. And now I can export. I didn't name it. My pose. Now I can head back in here, create one more. And finally bring in the animation. And now this, because it's a pose, you need to set it up a little bit differently in that the duration I do 1 as the start, 2 as the end, and 0 as the loop. That'll just make it go from frame 1 to 2, which are the same, and loop forever. And if I go to apply, actually I'll want to disable gaze here as well. Now when I click play, you'll see it's in the same pose that I had in Blender. And I believe that covers everything from the animation tool.
Cool. Yeah, that's awesome.
Okay, it looks like we have a poll going.
Yeah.
Sorry to
meshes,
interrupt, guys.
textures.
Greg
Cool.
has been frantically answering questions in the background.
Yeah, and that's why I've been a little quiet. I've been frantically answering questions. I left a couple questions open that I think are really good questions. There's several great questions that came up when we're ready to jump into question and answer. Did you have anything else there, Cameron?
I believe that covers it, and we can go into all the different questions.
Cool. The one that came up here was someone was asking, can you bring in well, one this, I think two people asked this question is, could you bring in your own avatar for doing the clothing products? Because a lot of people, as was pointed out, hardly anybody uses the default avatar to make clothing products too. They use probably the enhanced skeleton or enhanced avatar or their own avatar. Because if you're making products for a specific product line or avatar look, you need to do that. And I think that's an interesting idea. Like that would be great to support. I just don't know how we would do that because the avatar is skinned to the skeleton, so you'd have to have some way of getting the skeleton with the avatar or replacing the whole skeleton maybe. But it's a great.
Yeah, I mean the skeleton itself will have to stay as that skeleton, and then all the body parts aren't exported; they're just referenced. So if you were to bring in your own avatar meshes, as long as it's not in that export folder, the actual mesh won't be exported. So you can use that as reference, and probably also weight it to the avatar as well. That will still work fine. It may need some janky workarounds as you mess with it, but at the end of the day, as long as the skeleton isn't touched, and as long as the I can open up the clothing tool real quick here.
Oh, you're not sharing anymore.
Oh, not okay. Well, as long as all of the meshes are in clothing.export, those will be exported, and as long as they're weighted to the skeleton inside of the tool, it should work.
You can share if you want. Not a big deal either way.
Sure, I'll keep it up.
Yeah.
So yeah, as long as this clothing.export folder is all that it looks at.
So you can bring a reference skeleton or reference avatar in and put it somewhere else in another collection. I tend to work this way too. I have even in Max, 3 Studio Max, I have a layer that I call export, and I just like double click on that and select that, and I do an export selected of just that export stuff, and then I keep everything else in other layers, or in Blender it would be other collections. And that's a good way to keep it separated. Another question is the ability to add a second avatar, and specifically to do like cooperative animations. Couple people brought that up. One was because of the avatar itself, because the big head avatar isn't really conducive to doing, like, say, if you're doing a kiss or even presumably hugs, you're not going to necessarily match right. So being able to bring your own avatar and also bringing 2 avatars and doing cooperative animations. I was going to answer that, but I can pass it off to you, Cameron.
Sure, it's definitely something that we can look into. Currently, it wouldn't be possible. I'd say probably the sooner of the two would be the 2-person animation. We could probably get something working to pull in a second rig. I would just have to understand more that process. And then in terms of bringing in your own avatar, that may be a little bit tougher, just since the bones need to stay the same. But you could absolutely even the way that it is now, let's see, you could bring in your own mesh. There's a mesh folder here that's not exported. If you brought in your own mesh and just did auto weights, it wouldn't look perfect, but it may get you like started, or at least most of the way there,
Yeah.
in terms of making it not this avatar.
Yeah, the only tricky part there is then being able to use that, that asset for your animation as opposed to another asset, or the asset that comes with the tool.
And similarly with all the other, with like clothing, the only thing exported here is this animation.export folder, which is essentially just this this armature. So any of the meshes that are on here and any of these controls aren't exported. So as long as as long as any meshes you bring in aren't under that folder, it should work correctly.
Cool. There's another question here. And actually, probably you could show this. This is with the animation tool. We're going to use male also. Did you show that you could switch between male and female? It's the
That
same.
doesn't work on the animation tool, just because that was just the weighting that I had. But there will probably be a male-female switch for this as well. But yeah, you can still use the animation with males. It's the same skeleton.
Same, yeah, it's the same skeleton, right?
Yeah.
Let's see. Yes, actually, we have a question here that maybe Tauntaun can answer. When will we be able to do sounds in Studio?
Sounds, yes. We're working on a plan, because if we implement sounds, we need to implement it on desktop and mobile and Studio all at the same time. So I don't have any definite date for you, but it is something definitely on the roadmap, and it's sort of one of the last parity projects to move over from the classic client. I will say though that we might end up not doing sound in exactly the same way as it was done in the client. But again, we are looking for a solution. I'm sorry we don't have a timetable on that though.
I have one question that I just want to confirm with you guys. So someone had asked about whether we would recommend the toolkit for 3ds Max over Blender or Blender over 3ds Max. And I just said it depended on what tool you preferred to use. Do you guys have anything to add to that, or does that sound reasonable to you?
Yeah, so I'm leaning towards complete switching from 3ds Max into Blender due to Blender being free, open source, and it has a lot of functionalities that I've found useful when creating the toolkit. However, we're not going to stop somebody from using 3ds Max if that's what they prefer. So that's why we do have the 3ds Max toolkit in the works as well. However, you could also do the workflow of creating something in 3ds Max, importing that mesh into Blender and setting it up with this toolkit, and then bringing that into Studio.
Yeah, I come from using 3D Studio Max in the background, well, and Maya too, but I'm much more familiar with Max, although Blender, I must say, is a very powerful tool for being free.
Yeah.
And so if I was to like not have Max anymore, I would switch to Blender in a heartbeat. That being said, we know there's a lot of people out there who do use Max, so I think it's important to have the tool set for that as well.
Yeah.
And neither of these guys are being paid by the Blender guys. Let me just make that clear right now. And Cameron, I mean, you basically trained in Max, right? And
no, I trained in Maya.
Oh, you did? Oh, you trained in Maya.
Yeah, Max is a completely new, Max and Blender, really. I'm completely new to.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, Cameron's not a fan of Max.
I'm too new school.
Let's see what else we got here. Oh, hey, this is a great question. Actually, I'd love to answer this one. So it says unrelated to Toolkit, but will there ever be an add-on to invite friends to create with you in studio? We have actually talked about this. Tauntaun, if you could add some color too. One of the things that I'm working toward trying to do a proposal for is the ability for people to work collaboratively, either together in the same session, which we've talked about, or to be able to basically hand off editing of a product back and forth, because we know that there are a lot of people out there who work as teams, like a mesher and a texture artist. And it would be really cool to be able to have them work sort of seamlessly together back and forth. So nothing formal in the works yet, but definitely something we're looking at.
Drossel and I were actually talking about this very thing just several weeks ago. We were actually working on some products internally for IMVU, and we actually already have some admin tools that allow, like Drossel and I can publish a product, but we can open each other's products for edit because we're admins and we have these internal tools, and it wouldn't be that much further of a leap to allow users to do that with other people that they approve of. Maybe think about it in the same way as sharing a Google Doc, right? You choose the people that you want to share. Now, I don't think we'd be able to get to the point where you could edit in IMVU Studio at the same time, but we're definitely thinking about doing something where you can hand off a project back and forth to each other. So we're thinking about that one. That has been requested a number of times. So it's at the top of one of our lists.
Here's a couple questions from a couple of different people that are related. They're both asking about hair products or hair meshes. First person, anonymous attendee, says, hello, could you give me a small explanation for bringing in your own hair mesh and which tool and folder you might place your mesh in? And then Penelope asks, my question is actually, when using this toolkit with Blender, I have created a hair mesh. Would I attach it using the attachment append tool or the clothing append tool? Great questions. You want to get that, Cameron?
Sure. I believe those would just be clothing tools. I haven't made any hair myself.
Yeah, that's my assumption too. I think hair is typically more like a clothing.
It's definitely not an attachment since those are rigidly bound to one bone. But you could do a clothing that has hair that's bound to, the head and the shoulders and whatnot to make it flow. So yeah, I would use the clothing tool for that.
And then maybe where could you bring up the clothing tool? Maybe I think they're asking where you might put the mesh in the scene.
Sure.
That's what Anonymous is asking.
I go into the clothing tool here. I mean, if you bring in a hair mesh, I guess I'll just
make a hair cube. There you go.
There's some luscious hair locks or cube locks. There we go. If that's your hair, as soon as you click bind to armature, it'll go under the clothing.export collection on its own.
And then from there, it's just a matter of weighting it correctly for how you want it to move with the avatar.
Which the auto weights usually do a good starting point. So that's always a good place to start and see what happens. Also, a good thing to note on here. Can I delete that? Yeah. If you do go into these folders, I could grab the hair here, and if I click bind to armature, it doesn't work. Or is it just I think it's just drag into here because it's already bound. You can drag any of these meshes into clothing.export. So you could use that to either
As a
use
starting.
this as a starting point. You could modify this, and then you have a head export from here, or you can also paint weights from it and see how it's weighted. So if I were to grab the upper body, I don't even need to move it, but if I click paint weights there and click paint weights, or is that, no, that's something I'm working on the future update. I forgot that that wasn't currently in this one, but in the future, you'll be able to click paint weights and you can see the weighting of other body parts.
We're
Cool.
at about the hour mark, but we could certainly go over if there are more questions that you want to answer live. Otherwise, we can include them in the follow-up article.
Yeah, we will definitely, if there are any unanswered questions, we will definitely include those, and we'll be including all the answered questions in the post as well. But if there are any unanswered questions we don't get to, we'll answer those offline, and then they'll be in the video when it's posted. Let's see here. Just as a viewer that, oh, well, this is sort of a follow-up question to the people working together. Tauntaun, Kylie is asking, what about the ability to invite another avatar to create mode just as a viewer, so like spectator mode?
Right. Just like having them in the room with you.
Yeah, or kind of like the anonymous live room participant.
Mm-hmm. We haven't really thought about that one internally, but that's if there's enough interest in something like that, it would definitely be something that's possible. Because in IMVU Studio, you're launching a room the same way you are in IMVU Desktop or mobile, but you're just doing it without the chat experience. In fact, we even leave the chat window in IMVU Studio, but it's just for testing. So it wouldn't be too far of a leap to allow other people to see what you're doing. Although I'd have to say, if the other person were just an observer, what's the difference between that, or what advantage would that have over doing something over Zoom or over a video chat? So yeah, good. There's definitely an interesting idea. Some questions to be answered there, though. Yeah, thanks for that.
Okay. I think I've caught up on the answers here. The only other question, let's see, Chris was asking for new meshers, can you give some examples how to make a basic mesh with IMVU Studio Toolkit and how to import them? Well, it's a little out of scope of what we were going to cover. We're just trying to show the toolkit. There are actually a lot of really good Blender how-tos on how to model and make meshes. And when it comes to doing the import, you would just use the tool. You bring your mesh into the tool after you've launched the tool, and then set it up with whatever product type you're making. So if it's a room, and actually Cameron showed at the beginning, you can just bring in your own mesh and replace the oh, he's doing it again. So replace the tool provided room shell mesh with your own mesh. So you just go and find a mesh. There it comes in. And then there's several meshes here. Actually, it's not just one single mesh, but you just move those into the export collection. And at that point, you're pretty much ready to go. With other types of things like clothing, it's a little more involved because then you actually have to start weighting that mesh. And that's a little out of scope for what we were what we were going to cover here. We just wanted to show off how the tool works. Yeah, so Cameron just plopped that room mesh into the room collection under the room export collection, and now you're good to go.
And this room didn't have any nodes. It didn't have any seat nodes or anything. It was just the meshes with some materials on them. So that you can go through any Blender tutorial on YouTube or anything. Any way that you can model this, you can model it, bring it in by importing it, and then sort of tie it together with what the tool offers.
Technically, you could even model things in 3D Studio, export them as FBX and bring them into Blender.
Yeah, obviously that's
Use the
a bunch of
toolkit.
steps and not the ideal, but it is an option.
But along those lines, Yvonne is asking, is Toolkit compatible with SketchUp? So we did look into making a toolkit for SketchUp.
We want one.
It would be very cool. The unfortunate thing is SketchUp is really difficult to build tools for. And there's a lot of functionality that went into making Toolkit work for Blender and to make it work for Max. But both Max and Blender, you can develop for those very easily. Whereas Toolkit, it's problematic. And Toolkit actually, or excuse me, SketchUp is problematic. And SketchUp also, this would be a good question. I kind of wonder how many people use SketchUp for doing avatar related editing. I tend to think of that as being more of like a furniture room tool. Though I suppose you could make clothing, but as far as animating the avatar and weighting clothing, that's why Blender and Max are more appropriate. And what we really wanted to get into this tool was some of those things that become very tedious for users to do, such as weighting an avatar and testing the weighting. We wanted to make a tool that made it just much easier to get that done without having to learn all the details of how to use Blender. You'd have just a few simple tools to get you to the point where you could get your piece of clothing made, get it exported, and get it into IMVU. So I hope that answers your question.
I think it's time to wrap up, guys.
That sounds good.
All right. Most of our questions have been answered. And I just want to thank you, Drosselmeyer and Mighty Seven, for sharing your time and expertise. And thank you, Tauntaun, for hanging out with us and adding your expertise as well. And thank you everyone for attending this learning session and asking such awesome questions. We hope it was helpful for you, and we look forward to next time, maybe a 3ds Max mesh tutorial or mesh.
Hopefully.
Very fun.
I will quickly add that since it is still in beta and there will be a lot of issues as you find them, please just feel free to send any issues that you have on the forums, and I'll try to get to those and send out updates as quickly as I can.
Yeah. Oh, do we have a link to? I think we have a forum.
Let me. I just put it in there. cc.imview.com. That's Creator Connection, and then you'll find an IMVU Studio specific discussion category within that site. So yes, feedback welcomed on cc.imview.com.
I also put our studio email.
Oh yeah, great idea.
If you have if you run into issues using the tool and you have examples, screenshots are excellent. Like sample files are excellent. So if you've got like I've tried exporting this FBX, and when I bring it into Studio, it's all broken. If you send us the Blender file or the FBX file, we can take a look at that. We want, we're always open to trying to solve issues that creators are having, and we want to make this toolkit useful. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your morning, afternoon, evening, whatever applies to you, and we will talk to you soon.
Thanks to Love Warrior.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Awesome.
All right, thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.